Your Excellency, thank you for being with us. Still 1-2 minutes and we will start our... Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. We have very important topic to discuss with you today, and this is not only timely for us to be engaged, this is very timely for Ukraine and our partners, because you know that we are preparing intensively to the Peace Formula Summit, Global Peace Summit. And it is a very crucial moment for Ukraine to find out which kind of synergies we can foster from this communication, from this cooperation, and how we can go ahead with a further philosophy of peace formula. We have this discussion, which is named like Pathways to Peace, Exploring the Ukrainian Peace Formula. And today with us, we have a privilege to have Mariia Marchenko. He's Deputy Head of Department in Office of President of Ukraine. Maybe many of you know of Mariia because she just returned from her mission here in Brussels. We have with us Ambassador Sergiy Kyslytsya, permanent representative of Ukraine to the United Nations online. Thank you so much for being with us. We also will be joined by Soldatiuk, research fellow at the UN Global Affairs Unit and Clingendael Institute from Netherlands. And last but not least, my list, we are privileged to be in your premises, Amanda, and we have with us Amanda Paul, who is Deputy Head of Europe in the World Program in the European Policy Center. So, Amanda, let's start with welcome remarks from your side.
Thank you, Hennadiy. My welcoming remarks will be very short. I mean, first of all, it's a real pleasure for EPC to cooperate with Ukrainian Prism. I mean, for those of you that don't already know Ukrainian Prism, it's an amazing think tank from Ukraine that operates now in Europe and elsewhere. You do a great job. And as you rightly said, I mean, we're now 2 weeks away from the Peace Summit, which has been talked about already extensively in the media. I mean, there's a lot of, let's say, there's a lot hinging on this Peace Summit. It's important that the Peace Summit shows very tangible progress towards bringing a durable and just peace to Ukraine, and that the level of representation at the summit or participation is high, both in numbers and also level of representation. I mean, ministers, heads of state or whatnot, and also that it's diverse. It's important that the globe is recognized at this summit, because this will show the support that Ukraine has around the world, that it's not just, as some people like to say in other parts of the world, just a Western initiative or a Eurocentric. It needs to be diverse. And of course, it's important that the peace formula, President Zelensky's peace formula, is effectively operationalized into an effective roadmap. And as I'm guessing that you all read the news, we know that there's other initiatives that are out there from China and others, but unlike the peace formula of Ukraine, these don't really have any substance yet. They're just words on a piece of paper. The peace formula of President Zelenskyy is really the only game in town, which is why it's important that we have these sorts of discussions to actually explain what the peace formula really is, what are the next steps, why it's important that it's adopted, and how we can push back against those who are trying to promote other such peace formulas, particularly those that don't explicitly talk about the UN Charter, and particularly the principles linked to the UN Charter. So I'm only here to make opening remarks today, and so I wanted to keep it short. So I'm going to immediately pass back over to Hennadiy to launch the discussion.
Dear Amanda, thank you so much. It's always a privilege for us to be in this premises of European Policy Center and to partner in so many important initiatives. Let us start with intervention from our ambassador to permanent representative of Ukraine to United Nations, Sergiy Kyslytsya. Your Excellency, we know that you have tight schedule, so we would like to ask you the question. One of the positive sides about peace formula that is very tightly connected to UN Charter, and all 10 points also aligned with the international law. So, from your position, is it a strong argument for us to make, and also when we communicate with our partners from non-Western states? Please, the floor is yours.
Right. Thank you, Hennadiy, and good afternoon, Mariia and Julia and everyone. Well, I would like to, first of all, to express my gratitude for this opportunity to speak and to address the issue from the perspective of me being the Ukraine's ambassador to the United Nations. We may not like the United Nations. The United Nations is not perfect. The Secretary General himself stated at the last Munich conference that the system as designed does not work for anyone. But that is the world as is, and we have to deal with the world as is. I mean, we cannot Photoshop the world as we look at it when we are in the General Assembly. I think it is very important to remind that the history of formula is quite long, and the peace formula was initially presented by the President of Ukraine when he spoke online at the high-level segment of the UN General Assembly on the 22nd of September 2022. So the elaboration of the plan was then already underway, and by the essence of the peace formula was highlighted almost 2 years ago. As the President said, then addressing the General Assembly, it is a formula that can work not only for us, but for anyone who may find themselves in similar circumstances as we did. And we have to remind that there are more than 50 conflicts around the world, where the conflict in Europe is perhaps the most dramatic one since the United Nations was established. The day after the peace formula in its current form had been presented at G20 summit in Indonesia, we explained its logic and substance to the Security Council's members at the meeting of the Council. A week later, we arranged a special Security Council meeting, this time with the participation of the President of Ukraine, to address the peace formula and chart peace discussions among the Council's members within the philosophy of our 10-point peace plan. And we immediately, that's very important to remind everyone, we immediately started negotiations here in New York on the General Assembly draft resolution to reflect this vision, to reflect the peace formula of the peace. As you know, such a resolution was adopted on the 23rd of February 2023, entitled Principles of the UN Charter Underlying a Comprehensive, Just and Lasting Peace in Ukraine. So the logic of the peace formula is embedded in both the title and the substance of the UN General Assembly resolution. It contains references to war, impact on global food security, energy, nuclear security and safety, and environment. These corresponds to points 1, 2, and 3, and 8 of the peace formula. The General Assembly resolution calls for complete exchange of prisoners of war and the release of all unlawfully detained or deported persons, including children. And this corresponds to point 4 of the peace formula. The resolution is clear about the urgent need to restore respect for the UN Charter and ensure accountability, which are points 6 and 7 of the peace formula. So you see that the peace formula ideas are already enshrined in the document of the United Nations, in the document approved by 141 UN member states. Effectively, it was basically the endorsement of the peace plan as proposed by Ukraine then. So it's not surprising that the Russian Federation immediately responded with strong pressure, trying to discourage both member states and the UN Secretariat from engagement with the peace formula. And such pressure has reached its peak recently as we approach the summit in Switzerland, and Moscow does its best to undermine the event. It includes the open and behind-the-scenes pressure and threats to the UN Secretary General and other high officials in order to prevent their attendance of the summit in Switzerland. So it is important, therefore, that we have the above resolution, which the UN has used as a point of reference to substantiate their engagement with the peace formula process. In particular, the United Nations participates in the implementation of point 5 in five paragraphs out of 10 of the peace formula. We know that the Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo took part in meetings at the level of national security advisors, including the most recent one in Davos. This Wednesday, the President of Ukraine had a phone conversation with the Secretary General, and the Secretary General of the United Nations confirmed that the UN will be present at the summit in Switzerland. We continue our work with Estonia as a co-chair of the working group number 5 to produce the basis for thematic follow-up activities after the summit. And among other things, we try to elaborate realistic proposals in response to the immobilization of the Security Council on the Russian aggression track. The ultimate success depends upon the coordinated efforts of Ukraine and all our allies, both at the level of governments and expert communities, to globally promote that there could be no alternative to a vision of peace. Calls for a ceasefire without withdrawal of Russian troops have nothing to do with peace, let alone justice, because such a truce will only be used by aggressor to accumulate forces for further offensive. Demanding from Ukraine not to escalate the situation does not correspond to Article 51 of the UN Charter on the right to self-defense, and is equivalent to demanding that the victim of an assault does not resist to attempted murder. We have regularly stated on many occasions here in New York that no nation in the world aspires peace more than Ukraine. However, that peace must be comprehensive, just, and lasting. That is why we call on all countries that respect the UN Charter and seek peace to join the Peace Summit in Switzerland. If those countries that came up with their own suggestions are genuinely interested in stopping the war, they could contribute to these goals through the participation in the Peace Summit. It is a peace framework developed by the participants of the summit, not the ultimatums of Russia, that should become the foundation for achieving peace. Russia may be able to take part in the second summit, which will be held at the appropriate time, based on its readiness to return to respect for international law. It is a fundamental issue if we are able to secure relevance of the core principles, like respect for sovereignty and inviolability of borders, the chances for better future for the world will increase. Well, I thank you. I will conclude with that my introductory remarks. Thank you.
Ambassador, thank you so much. I think it was comprehensive and it just laid good ground for our discussion. And thank you for this good news that UN is preparing itself to take part in global peace summits. And I think it's also for us to see how we could find solutions to point number 5, which is also part of the umbrella and cooperation with United Nations. Mr. Kyslytsya has to leave us at maybe in 10 minutes. So if there are just immediate questions, we have the moment, we will go ahead. Yes, please. Wait for a mic. Yes.
Thank you for the floor, Dmytro Shkurko, National News Agency of Ukraine. Today we have a news that China refuses to send their representative to to Switzerland for a peace summit because the Russian side was not involved in that conference. How that could impact the effectiveness of the peace summit in Switzerland, and what can we expect from that China's decision? And the second issue, it is good to know that 141 countries of the UN are supporting the peace formula of President Zelenskyy. But from other point of view, as Zelenskyy said, there could be some kind of changes to the position. What kind of modification of the peace formula we can expect if that changes will arise from the discussion in Switzerland? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador.
Right. I'm not going to comment the reports by international media on allegedly Chinese position on participation. I haven't had a chance to talk to the Chinese representative here in New York since the reports were published. But anyway, the fundamental thing that I have never heard, neither from the Ukrainian leadership nor from my colleagues, that the fundamentals of the peace formula and the fundamentals of the peace formula later on reflected in the UN resolution will be changed. The beauty, so to say, of the Ukrainian peace formula is that it is entirely based on the UN Charter. And that is why 141 out of 193 decisively voted for this framework. And I have to remind you that that the vote took place in 2023 in February, at the moment, exactly at the moment when China, on the eve of the vote, put forward its ideas about the peace solution. So nevertheless, the world decisively gathered in the General Assembly Hall and supported the framework that was put forward by Ukraine. So I think that we should not put our stakes on a situation where these fundamentals will be changed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lev, you have a question, please.
Hello, my name is Marchenko. I work at the European Policy Center, and I had one question for you, Ambassador Kyslytsya. To what extent is the point 2 of the peace formula, which is food security, still relevant? Still, since most of the countries of the developing world don't depend on the agricultural experts from Ukraine at the moment. So yeah, to what extent is the point 2 of the peace formula is relevant at the moment?
Well, the peace formula part on food security is fundamentally relevant. If this event we are taking part today in will last for 2 hours, do you know how many people will die of hunger around the world? 50,000. Every hour, at least 25,000 people die of hunger. If we speak about 2022, the year the aggression, the full-scale aggression against Ukraine started, only in Somalia, because of the drought, 48,000 people died. Half of them were children. So the world is suffering every single moment. There is someone around the world who is dying of food scarcity. While at the same time, we have to also be very clear that the problem is not even with the lack of proposal of food or at the international markets. The problem is that food is there, but the channels of supply are broken. There was this problem with delivery of Ukrainian food products through Black Sea. There is now a very acute problem with delivery of foodstuff in Red Sea because of Houthis and terrorist activities over there. So the discussion in Switzerland, and And part of the discussion will be centered around the safety of maritime traffic in the Black Sea is fundamentally important. And that is why I believe there are so many countries around the world beyond European continent who are looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you. If there are no questions at this moment, we wish you all the luck with the rest of this working week, Your Excellency. And thank you so much for this briefing. I think it was very instrumental for us to go on with the discussion. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Now, with no further ado, we go to our offline panel, and I'm happy to give the floor to a friend of mine and to great specialist on issues which come to our security and foreign policy. Mariia, you found yourself in the center of decision making when it comes to Office of the President. Many points also part of the responsibility of this institution, but it's also involved in making the whole philosophy of the formula. Could you just elaborate a little bit more what you can share with us? Certainly, what are other principles? One is UN Charter and our respect to the norms of international law. What are these pillars of this formula?
Thank you. First of all, good afternoon to everyone. And Hennadiy, thank you for invitation. It's a really great pleasure and honor to be here. And thank you, Amanda, for organizing this event. It's really nice for me to come back to Brussels. I should say that I'm more specialized on EU affairs, accession talks, but I will be happy, of course, to answer later on your questions regarding peace formula. But overall, I would like to present you first at what stage we are now with preparation of a peace summit, because it's really now, I would say, top priority for us to guarantee as much as possible high-level participation in this summit, and very important that we are succeeding. And the level of participants is growing, and among also global South countries. I think it's the most important, and it showed really how delivered we are in our aims, and the President, our diplomatic corps, also exerted enormous efforts to guarantee success of this summit. Because the thing that the success of the summit and the global presence of this event would be a clear signal that will world support peace in Ukraine, comprehensive, just, and lasting peace. And that everybody wants peace based on principles, UN Charter, as you mentioned, Hennadiy, it's really important. Second point, what I want to mention, it's regarding the this summit. It won't be just the summit for itself, but I want to also underline it's already success of having this summit, because you know how many efforts also Russia did just to prevent this summit happening. So it's already very important that we are organizing this event. Summit will be concentrated on 3 points. It will create a platform. 3 points Ambassador Kyslytsya already mentioned. It's nuclear security, food security, and the return of Ukrainian children and detainees. And the main idea is that summit should result in a joint plan to implement how to implement peace formula. And I completely share views of Ambassador Kyslytsya that indeed there is no alternative for how to reach peace, return peace to Ukraine as the President's peace formula of Ukraine, this summit. And nevertheless, that we are now really focusing on preparing the success of this inaugural part of the summit. We are already thinking about second summit. So we are very ambitious in this sense, and that is why it's really now important to engage all partners, namely from Global South. I can share, but I can't give you a concrete number because it is a public event. Unfortunately, I'm not authorized to name you concrete number, but it's around, I think, 100, more than 90, I would say, already. Invitees confirmed their participation in this summit. I think it's already a success, and the number is growing. So I think we'll reach more than 100, and it's really significant because a lot already head of states and governments confirmed from their participation from Global South. But we are still, our diplomats and president, we are working on having much more. And just to conclude, I would like to let you know, the audience, that Ukraine, I think, like no other, wants peace. But it is important to understand that we are not ready and would not accept peace at any price. As already mentioned, peace should be comprehensive, just, and lasting. And to reach this, we need all support of the international community, our partners. I might say that we are very grateful also for the EU, because we are in Brussels, how they are helping us to outreach leaders from different countries in Latin America, I mean, Global South. So it shows how really we could be, with our joint efforts, successful, and it will be possible only together to reach peace in Ukraine. Thank you. We'll be happy to answer your questions.
Mariia, thank you so much. I think it's a great news, and we really see that attendance of this peace summit is something of indicator of success. Because you know that it's very important for us to showcase that Ukraine moves steadfastly ahead with the numbers. You maybe heard that number of participants during the Davos NSA meeting, which was the last senior level meeting, was around 83 or it is 83. It means international states plus international organizations. So I think it was for us bottom line to start with, to show that we are moving ahead with political decision and political implementation of the decision made on expert level. With this, I would like to give the floor to Yulia Soldatiuk, representative of Clingendael Institute. But Yulia, you're also part of the great endeavor on expert level to involve international expert community in deliberation about peace formula. So I would like to ask you maybe to share your view as think tanker from EU member state from one hand, and from other, just having this outreach on your side, what you see as a challenge and prospect of this process.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Good to be here. And just to jump on the message of Ms. Marchenko, and you also mentioned Davos just now. In Davos, there was a really good representation, right? But it was already a forum where a lot of leaders were present. So the fact that already 80 or more countries had confirmed their participation specifically to come to something in Switzerland, this is, I think we can already count as a success. On my part, so what I do mainly is actually looking more into actor mapping at the positions of different countries, and what I see and what I also try partly to do in my work is to explain there's necessity to the public in the EU to explain the meaning of the summit. Is it actually a start of a peace process, of not? To sometimes also the meaning of the peace formula. So there is a lot of kind of work that still needs to be done to inform the general audience on the concept around it. And what I would like to stress first is that on the why the importance of the peace formula and what it actually entails is an important feature of it is that it addresses universal values that actually no other countries cannot disagree with the 10 points that are addressed there. The question is how to find a common points in a way that countries that are far away from or for who the conflict, the war in Ukraine is far away from their home, that they will feel passionate about itself, and that they find certain points, certain topics that they can really take an action on and feel the need to advocate for that as well and support it. The peace formula also provides an important alternative to the sustainable peace and non-reoccurrence, and it's a really important argument, I think, to share with those who are more with other countries like perhaps India, Indonesia, Brazil, China, that are very much interested in ceasefire as soon as possible. So just finalizing conflict. The challenge is that the only peace formula can present a really sustainable solution to the conflict and to non-reoccurrence, and by perhaps I'm preaching to the choir here, but by sustaining the ceasefires in Moldova, in Georgia, in Ukraine, EU will only create and continue to maintain the kind of ring of instability and preventing those countries to economic development. What is really important, I think, the key challenge of the peace formula, but also efforts of Ukraine on the way to the peace process, is how to ensure that security guarantees actually have a really tangible and concrete instruments and mechanisms of enforcement built in before the peace treaty or any type of negotiated settlement or something like this can be signed in the future. So I think the lack of enforcement, and that is also something we see in the challenges of discussions that are there in NATO framework, is that I guess in the past decennia, there was a really NATO is a really strong alliance, but it is very much developed to deter, right? And how to act when actually act, and to provide speedy response when it is needed is something what is Ukrainian kind of building a blueprint or hoping to build a blueprint. This hasn't been done before. So also the combat readiness of the NATO countries, something that many members have realized is not ideal. So that's, I think, the main challenge for Ukraine is how to, on one hand, reach enforceable security guarantees. On the other hand, prevent scenario when other countries would be deciding upon Ukraine's sovereignty, when, for example, peacekeeping troops or something, the similar scenario is stationed on the ground of Ukraine, that this also limits the choice and the freedom to take certain decisions. Another point is EU has been doing a lot to support Ukraine, but the message what I've been hearing from some other countries like India, for example, is that how those countries, they still look, especially countries that are within ASEAN, they still look to the European Union as an example. So when they see that there's a lack of decisiveness, as they see it, on a position, on a kind of statement to deter Russia to really decisive position on support to Ukraine, they also don't feel compelled to make a decision. So whenever, but most likely, if the European Union will issue a really decisive position supported by actions, those countries will also be more inclined to decide on which side they want to be. And the last and I think most important message that is resonating many parts of the world is that with peace formula, Ukraine also can help to, or like the joint efforts can be combined to send a clear message that the act of aggression towards any country should not be acceptable. And so those structures that have been created out of the Second World War, they are for international legal order, they are still good and valid. They just need to be enforced. So this is, I guess, the next step: how to build on clear enforcement, clear answer. Yeah, thank you.
Yulia, thank you so much. You also present some very important issues which are worth of discussion here in these premises. And I think that EU's example is quite an interesting story for us to try to persuade our partners to be more vocal and to be more steadfast in their activity when it comes not even to some peace initiatives, because I understand that some is still not ripe for that, but rather to go ahead with military and financial support and political support to Ukraine, which is also part of the decisive picture which should be influencing the result in the end of the day. I would like also to reflect on some issues. Let me start from showing this publication. Those of you who don't know or who don't have at the moment, please, we have still with us some samples. This is the idea which is based on discussions in Ukraine of expert community, think tanks, and what we see as an added value of peace formula, and have to maybe try to resonate more vocally in Global South region. But let me just state to what already was mentioned by my colleagues, Mariia, Yulia, and Sergiy Kyslytsya, that one of the pillars is clear enshrine of all the norms of UN Charter. Each of these 10 points is part and parcel of the UN Charter and those norms and conventions which are based on this document. This is something which differs us from other initiatives which pop up recently. And when you just look at them, you'll see that even this new initiative of six points from Brazil and China, which is not bilateral, but rather Chinese invention, it has no references to UN. Although previously, last year, in February 2023, there were some references to UN Charter, and they wanted to play with this, but now they're just trying to play it otherwise. So I think this is yet a big difference when we talk about clear commitment and that we abide by UN Charter. Next point, that Ukrainian peace formula is not only about Ukraine, but it's about global outreach. And these 3 points, which are mentioned to be part of the agenda in Switzerland, they are our strongest attempt to overlap with the interest of other countries. One of our colleagues mentioned about food security. I think still it is a valid point to be part of that, and especially in connection to freedom of navigation. And many of our partners during our discussions, during NSA meetings, also indicate the necessity of being deeply involved in that. Maybe they argue about the instrument and process. Maybe it should be more behind the closed doors, but still I think that it is very important that we keep this point and trying to reach the moment when we do not only raise concerns, but propose some initiatives and mechanisms how to deal with this. Nuclear, definitely this is a big issue for all the states which have civil nuclear facilities on their territory. And if you have such a blatant violation of international law, and one of the biggest, really the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe is taken hostage by Russia, is mined, is used as a stock for its military weaponry, I think it's something to deal with and to find the remedy. Because if we go ahead with this, if we just give green light this possibility, I think no one is secured from your facilities being used as an objective of terrorist attack. So I think we have find out what is possible even before we sit at the table and talk about the end of war, because it's already there. Humanitarian dimension. This is also a very important issue because we have Geneva Conventions. And it's awful that even some process of war is awful. But when you don't have full disrespect to these conventions by one of the parts of the war, about the conditions where our detainees are held and what they just endure each and every day, I think we should be more vocal that also these norms should be enforced. So this is where we try to find overlaps with interests of others. Even this formula of China with 12 points, these 3 points are also part of the Chinese process as well. So we're trying to put them at the same page and to discuss what is possible on the level of the discussion. The Russia's participation is also quite clear moments. Some states refuse to participate on high level or at all because Russia is not presented there. But I think the philosophy of Ukraine's peace formula is that we invite to this first inaugural summit those who respect territorial integrity of Ukraine. Otherwise, if you want to propose some interests, some mechanisms, some ideas, do you expect of Russia to endorse them? How to limit its leverage in blocking Ukrainian nuclear facilities, or how to block their possibilities to block Black Sea? So I think now we're trying to find what might be common denominator between our partners and then to communicate it with Russia. Yet it's an uphill struggle to make complete philosophy of the second peace summit, because Russia, by idea, should be there, and as Mr. mentioned, if it is ready to embark on the level of negotiations, but still, to that point, we have to create, also just referring to what Mariia says, to peace plan. This is yet another picture and pillar of this peace formula. We have our initiative as Ukrainians, peace formula, 10 points, but we then move to peace plan. And peace plan is not already Ukrainian origin. It's a joint endeavor, joint ownership. And I think this is main or core distinction from that initiatives we have from other international players. Because, for example, we are stating each and every time that we are ready to embark all 141 of those states who adopted the resolution of General Assembly on peace formula. Well, talking to Chinese colleagues, you may feel, okay, let's have some smaller club, for example, P5 plus Ukraine plus European Union, or be it G20, but why we should limit if there is really global issue and global impact of the situation? So I think this is yet another pillar which just constructs, for us, for Ukrainians, it's a logical way of putting the things in peace initiative, although we're still far from the point when we see the step with Russians. But I think we should prepare the plan to have it with us, and when the moment is ripe, just to go in line with this plan, but also to have 100 plus of partners who can endorse their willingness to abide by rules we invent or we fine-tuning. So I think this is yet another points which might be important about this peace formula. If you would be interested, some ideas yet in this publication. With this, I would like to open the floor for questions and to discussions. Maybe before we open the floor to our audience, I'll ask Amanda to reflect on some issues you've heard from her speakers, if you want.
Yeah, thank you, Hennadiy. You caught me off guard there. I think, to be honest, I think you explained, I mean, the speakers explained very well, I mean, the thinking behind the peace formula, the link to the UN Charter, why the other initiatives aren't comparable at all to the peace formula, because it has real substance and reflects the initiatives of the United Nations. I mean, for me, the biggest challenge still remains selling the peace formula to the global South. I mean, in all of its aspects, this is something that still hasn't been totally successful. I mean, yes, global South countries will show up to the actual peace summit, but that doesn't mean that they're all on the same page. Let's say as Ukraine's more reliable partners. So it boils down to really explaining, I mean, as you mentioned, why it's important, why it's important to them that they support it, because to some countries in the global South, this is still not clear. I mean, I don't like calling them the global South, actually. I prefer to call them global powers, but it's still not clear to many why this war is relevant to them. This is how it's viewed, particularly around the broader population. I mean, when you speak to people in Egypt or South Africa or in Brazil, there's little interest in the war or why it's relevant to them. So I think it's important that much more outreach is done to different levels to actually explain this and get these countries on board, because we need to remember, while we're sitting here, Russia, China, and some other major players are actually actively going around the globe promoting other initiatives and having some success in this. Maybe their initiatives are quite empty, but there is still this perception that what's on the table at the moment doesn't necessarily reflect the interests of some of the other big players. So I think there's still some work to be done, but the proof of the pudding is going to be the peace summit itself, the output from the peace summit, and taking it to the next step. But in parallel to that, what's really important, more important than anything actually, is that we see the robust process of supplying Ukraine with the weapons that it needs, particularly the air defense systems, because there is, again, this perception around the globe in many countries, and even in Europe, to be honest, that Ukraine can't win. And if Ukraine can't win, why drag out the war longer than it needs to be? I mean, this is half of the battle. So in that sense, there's really a need for Ukraine's allies to step up arms production and to step up what they already have in delivering it, so that we can change the dynamic on the battlefield, because the dynamic on the battlefield at the moment is not seen as being in Ukraine's favor. And there's a sense that this is not going to change. So this should be the first important step, changing the dynamic that Ukraine can win, that Ukraine can restore its territorial integrity, and that its partners are ready to create the necessary security guarantees. And then this will change the picture for some countries in other parts of the world that remain skeptical. So the two things really need to go together, making progress on the peace formula, but at the same time doing what we need to do to actually deliver to Ukraine to be able to win. The two things are not separate. They're actually one of the same process.
Mariia, thank you. I subscribe under these 2-point solution, progress and peace formula, and also greater support to Ukraine. We open to your questions and comments, please. If yes, we have here first. Is it on?
It on? No. Yes. Okay. Well, thank you for the mic. Thank you for all your interventions. A few reflections and ideas. First of all, I think it is very important for Ukraine to have such a plan, because Ukrainian is a subject and not only an object of international relations. Otherwise, we would have been on the defensive, trying to answer or criticize others' projects. We have our own, and we're open to debate about it. Very good point. Secondly, about the Global South, I know that Russia won't be there. China, we don't know yet. Do you have already answers from South Africa, India, Brazil? These are the leaders of that Global South, right? So that's important. And the last point is, I noticed that in the 10 points mentioned in the program or in the plan, we speak about justice. What is under that word justice? Do we mean condemnation about the aggression, about the whole system who provoked the aggression? Because if we don't condemn that, it can happen again anytime. Thank you.
Kyslytsya, Harvard Aerospace and Defense Alumni Organization, Harvard Oval, Brussels. I completely support previous speakers, participants, that to restore justice and to restore territorial integrity without apparent desire of Russia to retreat from Ukraine, the only way to do it is to increase support, military support, either in weaponry or in boots on the ground, or maybe both. And I'm glad that at least in France, some Macron, for instance, can start raising these questions. So I see the only way to provide this enforcement to make Russia retreat by all means. Otherwise, it would not be no territorial integrity and no justice. And I understand, I see how difficult it goes and how many barriers we have in Europe particularly. But maybe we as international community should be doing some more appeals, to this, to nurture this question, because it's the only way. And unfortunately, we don't have eternity, right, at our disposal. People are dying, resources are limited. So thank you so much.
For the mic. My name is Tessa Gila. I'm from the European Parliament. I work with the Greens there. My question is, well, two questions really about indeed engaging the Global South. When the full-scale invasion happened back in 2022, I was in New York working at the UN there. And there I witnessed very much the response from Europe and from the West at large was to have the big European countries and America speaking on behalf of Ukraine and calling on the world to support Ukraine and focusing on the element of this being a war between democracy and autocracy. While this is all very true, how do you reflect upon that now? How that has allowed this narrative to take the front stage, and for Russia actually to be able to also paint this as a war between NATO and Russia, or the West and Russia, and how that then in turn influences how people in the Global South view this war? Is there now more of an effort of focusing on the angle of it being a colonial war, of Russia being unable to shed its perspective of Ukraine as its territory, former colonial territory that it wants to regain? And how do you see that perhaps both those views both views are correct, but perhaps a second view or narrative perhaps is more viable in certain Global South countries, and that perhaps instead of having Western European countries speaking for Ukraine or America, that it should be perhaps more countries like the Baltic states and Poland being given front stage, given their own experience of colonial aggression? And then perhaps my second question pertains more to the region itself. How do you view the roles of Turkey and Iran more recently? We know Turkey previously tried very hard or pushed its sort of mediating role in terms of the grain deal, but we've sort of seen their efforts receding perhaps recently. How do you view that, especially in context of the Peace Summit? Thank you.
Thank you. We have quite a host of questions. So let's start, Julia, from your side. Which one do you want to pick up?
Okay. I guess I will leave the participation and justice, definition of justice to Ms. Marchenko as a representative from the Office of the President. And I would like to start from the end, perhaps to reflect on your questions. Right, so to start with countries speaking on behalf of Ukraine, on the one hand, it has brought many issues, many sensitivities in different conflicts around the world into Ukraine. So actually that were not directly connected with Ukraine, but the Ukraine has to deal with now because of the perception of this, indeed what you described as a proxy war. On the other hand, at that situation, at that point, Russia has been developing its narrative for many years before that. So I don't think that there would be if you look back at this 2 years back, that there would be any other effective way to address this question. The speaking on behalf is an important point, and I think this is the main success of the peace formula of Ukraine, because in the beginning, the first days, there was a risk of Ukraine not being involved on the discussions on its own future, and I think the peace formula, the creation of it was so comprehensive, it's absorbed kind of all other initiatives that were, or even thoughts of creating that. So it made sure that Ukraine is speaking on itself and not someone else speaking on behalf of it. Then on other countries around the world, the countries in Africa and in Asia, and indeed Global South is a really wrong terms for many reasons, but specifically because that's a lot of different countries with different political ways, different economic ways, different interests. So they should be viewed also separately. And I think instead of speaking on behalf, so that the other countries are speaking again on behalf of Ukraine, we could look into specific categories of these countries and talk to them on the issues that that are relevant for them. For example, Nigeria is not supporting Ukraine at all, or Russia at all, because Nigeria had to deal with the consequences of food crisis in countries and neighboring countries. Nigeria had to deal with mercenaries, with Russian armies and refugees flows into the countries. And as a kind of regional leader, they see the role of Russia in Africa very differently than perhaps Uganda, that has a lot of economic relations. And so that's the kind of way how to look for separate thematic issues and then work separately on that. With regard to the role of Turkey in Iran, well, Turkey specifically is very much interested in continuing playing a role of facilitator, of mediator between Ukraine and Russia. Indeed, their mediation capacity is overstretched because they're also active in Somalia, they're also active in Palestine, but they are very interested into taking up on the sectoral issues. And that's because what they often say and address is that the other countries are engaging in war, so that's the Russia's aggression towards Ukraine, but Turkey is the country that has to deal with the impact of that, with the refugees, with the economic troubles, with the insecurity in the Black Sea region. So those are all kind of impacts that makes that forces Turkey to be one of the most vocal advocates for the sustainable resolution of the war in Ukraine. And next to that, Turkey is quite vocal in its position. So what is often discussed behind a closed door, and maybe perhaps other countries are reluctant to address, that's at least this is how Turkey views it, right? This is the only country, or one of the only countries, that are coming up and saying it directly, and then they get all the blame for being critical. But in the end, Ukraine is a strategic partner in the policy, in the foreign policy strategy of Russia, of Turkey. I'm so sorry, Russia is not. So if you look on the kind of benefit weight on both sides, you can say that Turkey is more in support of Ukraine, although its position sometimes, how they look at it, is confusing. I'll stop because there are many questions and I realize I'm talking a lot.
Yep. Mariia, which ones you want to pick and answer?
I just would like also to reflect on what Amanda said regarding this very popular Russian narrative. That Ukraine could not win the war, but actually it's already third war of the war, and Russia still hasn't advanced significantly. So I think also responding to your question, the key and what should be also focus of our partners, it's of course, I underlined several times in my speech, joint efforts. Ukraine can't withstand alone. So it's a key joint efforts and means everything. I mean, support of peace formula, supply of weaponry to Ukraine, providing air defense, because daily you see our cities just destroying every day. And despite that, of course, Putin tries to mislead with his ideas about negotiations and readiness to peace. Anyway, we see that the fighting is very severe day by day on the battlefield. So the right now answer to all this question, it will be only to support Ukraine on the battlefield, provide us with a strong Ukraine on military field, our success and advancement, recommitment of Russian troops. Of course, it will strengthen our positions in the global south. It's everything interlinked, even the support of China and Brazil. You see that Russia even recently said that Russia is not interested to take part in the peace summit. So a lot of also leaders from global south looked at it and they realized that we can actually join it. Russia itself doesn't want. So I can't tell you more in details because I'm not authorized to present the list of countries who already joined us, but believe me, it's really huge work. We close doors, diplomatic work, and you can see how many phone calls president have actually every day and visit. And these phone calls, it's also with some leaders from G7 countries. They also directed to engage with joint efforts, how to engage leaders of Global South. So it's really serious work. And we must remember that Russia really tried with different tools to prevent this summit happened. And this summit, it's already a great platform for leaders to discuss how we will move on, to exchange with different visions, and to work out, really elaborate joint vision. But the answer to the peace is only one. As I already mentioned about this, it's only could be comprehensive, just, and based on UN Charter. So thank you. I think I just wanted to combine on my answer.
Yes.
Maybe if you would like, I can precise.
You managed that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amanda, please. Yes, sure.
I mean, I have quite a loud voice. I just wanted to comment on a couple of things. When it comes to Turkey, I more or less agree with what you said. But still, I think we have to also acknowledge that President Erdogan is very much these days, more so than before, an interest-based actor. So he tries to play it both ways, which will be beneficial for him. Yes, I would agree that probably if you had to weigh it up, they're closer to Ukraine than Russia, but at the same time, there's been a significant increase of economic and trade activity between Russia and Turkey over the last couple of years, and also how many Russians are now invested in living in Turkey, in Istanbul, in Antalya, etc. So President Erdogan knows how to play a game which ends up being quite beneficial to him. When it comes to Iran, I mean, I think the situation is very complicated. I mean, Iran's support for Russia is I mean, it's dreadful to find a word for that. But on the other side, we need to understand how come we got into that situation in the first place. And this goes back to the US withdrawal from the JCPOA under Donald Trump, and the failure of the Biden administration actually to re-enter the JCPOA, the nuclear deal, when the opportunity was there. I mean, this left Iran, let's say, in an extremely isolated situation, which has certainly played a role in the country's decision to take this line of action by basically supporting Russia. If there's a way back from that, I don't know. But I mean, definitely, despite all the difficulties, track to or behind the channel diplomacy or conversation with Iran should still be pursued as a sort of possibility to change this dynamic. And I just wanted to make a couple of other points. I mean, what you said about the Nordic states is correct. I mean, for example, in South Africa, the messaging that comes from the Nordic states is taken seriously. It's listened to much more carefully than messaging that comes from, let's say, former colonial powers in South Africa. So this is important. Some of the messages that we want to get across, or some of the priorities, is much better coming from Norway or the Baltic states or whatnot, rather than from France or Germany. I agree that the narrative democracy versus autocracy was really a bad idea. It really backfired, and unfortunately, this messaging still hasn't been forgotten in some of the global South. And the other point I think is important to make is that, okay, we hate the Russians. We don't like the Russians, but we also have to acknowledge that when you're trying to outreach to the global South, you shouldn't use those terms, even though it's difficult to digest. You know, they see Russia and China as important partners that they're not going to get rid of from one day to the next. I mean, for example, in the case of South Africa, even after all these years, Russia is still viewed as an important partner. It engages with many people in the African National Council and whatnot. So they are not going to decide to reorientate their, let's say, foreign policy or their geopolitical priorities. The way with South Africa, with other countries, is to put across the reason why this war should matter to South Africa. What would be the implications? What are the implications, the impact on South Africa? But also in South Africa, as some of the other countries in that region, the fact that Ukraine was always on the back foot because Russia has been engaged in Africa for years. And again, many of the countries have positive memories. I mean, it's difficult to believe, but they have positive memories or thinking about Russia. And they simply just don't like being told what to do. You know, don't deal with Russia, forget about Russia. It doesn't work like that. They need to be convinced of why they should change their position on certain issues, or to have a stronger position on certain issues on their own merits.
Amanda, thank you. Maybe just to try to put some flavor to other questions put today. Ambassador, about this participation, you as former diplomat itself, know until the last day is still not solved. So there are different communications, consultations. We just came from Beijing these days, from interaction with Chinese think tanks. And being part of deep state, these think tankers try to give us a message. Delegation would be there. Delegation would do that. Just recently, we have these media appearances that no, China decides otherwise. So we will see in mid of June what would be the decision to take part on a level to take part, and then I think it's also relevant to Brazil, to others. I know that there are positive news from India, but let's see in the end of the day, because it's still fragile construction till the end of the consultations. Justice. I think here we can unpack a lot about the situation, and I think this is crucial for us, for Ukraine. I'm not confident it is the moment for us to share at this first inaugural Global South, but global summits. But what I could say that we have many initiatives packed in this point about responsibility for war crimes, how to document. There are special schemes already, global schemes of documenting war crimes, about crime of aggression, how to create a special tribunal, a special body to deal with this issue, because under the circumstances we can't just sue it to the International Criminal Court. We also in part of on process of delivering on compensation mechanism. There is first three points of this mechanism. First is register of damage in different areas, from some house in the States to some psychological damage. It also could be registered, and it's already in place. But there should be also a compensation fund and special compensation boards to decide on these issues. But I think these innovations could be good instruments for future, for further conflict. So I think here we see that our resolve is quite strong, that we can't go ahead with just ceasefire. As Mr. Kyslytsya mentioned, if there is ceasefire but there is no withdrawal, yet in a couple of months or years you have the same. So on justice, I think we're strong. We're trying to pursue already some cut mechanisms. About engaging decolonization, I think we make use and contributions from all our partners. For me, because it's part of my expertise to look what's going on with preparation to Global Peace Summit, I could say that on the level of president, on his team, on the level of MFA, you see different actors involved. Not only states, not only governments, but also actors, also some public figures, some businessmen, to be involved in process and just to try to persuade on different narratives, on different eras. And as we mentioned on Global South, there is a very tight communication at the moment with our Sweden colleagues and the project in common for Ukrainian students in Latin America. So I think that we're trying to involve as many as possible those who are willing to help with this, because it's a real global cause. I will stop here, and we are ready still to pick some questions and comments from on your side, if any.
Dmitry Shkurko, National News Agency of Ukraine, thank you for the floor again. We know that recently President Zelenskyy declared that more than 90 countries will take part in the peace summit. And he also mentioned that Ukrainian side is widely open for discussion, including with the countries which are not agreed with us. You know, my job is to ask the nasty questions. I just curious what could be a result of such kind of discussion if many countries, if not say majority countries of the South or global South, will not agree with Ukrainian position and Ukrainian peace formula, because you know many of them, as Amanda mentioned, consider Russia and China, for instance, like an important partners, and we know very little about the circumstances of the Russian war against Ukraine and even about Europe itself. So if we are speaking about some kind of a resulting part, what could be a result of these conversations, let me say so, and if there will be such a result, what will be the next step? And the second issue, what I want to raise, we know such an edition like a Bloomberg, which a few days ago spread information that in autumn there is a plan to conduct some kind of peace negotiations in Saudi Arabia between with the participations both with EU representatives and Russia concerning the peace in Ukraine. I can suppose it was some kind of information provocation, but still there was no officially denying that information by no level. My question is, do you know something about that kind of proposal? And generally speaking, is Ukrainian side ready to accept some kind of mediation of such kind of contact with Russia? And what could be a topic right now to speak about with Russia at that moment, if there is some? That is a question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A lot of questions. So I propose just to deal with this and then just give floor to you, because we have on my side 4 questions which I counted.
Yes, regarding result of this summit, as I already mentioned, the main idea and what we'd like to have as an outcome this summit is, of course, to agree on a plan, like framework for peace formula, how to implement actual peace plan, and just repeating how to implement peace plan. So it should be framework agreed with everybody, how we can go to the third step to implement it, because we have 10 steps, we have different groups, but it's really important now to have this platform with different leaders, how to agree on our common vision and start to implementing it. So it will be first inaugural summit and to agree, but it sounds like it's already very important, you know, to create this platform and gather all together. It's already very ambitious aim. And as I already underlined, we reached more than 90 level of confirmations. It's already significant. So if we will agree on a plan, it will be already, I think, a success with the summit. Now it's our key aim of this. Yeah.
Yulia, want to address something?
Yeah, sure. There was one question that about the boots on the ground. We, I think, didn't address, so I will come back to that if you don't mind. Yeah, so on what if Global South doesn't agree, I think specifically to address this point, in the composition of the Global Summit, the points were raised and will be discussed that are at least controversial and where universal agreement are most likely. Yes, and I think it's a lot depends on the messaging, right? If the countries feel that there's openness to hear their perspective, then there is less chance that there will be disagreements or differences of opinion perhaps will be accepted. Is Ukraine ready to accept mediation, and what would be the topics? Just from kind of expert opinion, if I may reflect on that. So for it is starting peace talks makes sense whenever both countries have, in general, not only in this case, when country has a beneficial position, right, a strong position. So every country would like to enter the peace negotiation process from the position of strength, and at this point, it seems not to be the ideal moment to start strategically to start negotiations, so that on a comprehensive kind of peace process. But on the other hand, the questions such as freedom of navigation or exchange of prisoners or Ukrainian children, kidnapped children, that's something where the dialogue is always possible and needed, I think. And to reflect really shortly on the boots on the ground, that is certainly would be an effective way for non-recurrence. There are discussions now that have been opened, whether it's, for example, possible to start with really small steps and sending just, for example, military personnel for repairs of military equipment in Ukraine, as opposed to sending it abroad to Poland, or perhaps to relocate AUMM military training missions closer to the border or to Ukraine in order to enhance, to allow for longer term missions. But with regarding to enforcing security guarantees, that can be done also by financial means and by material means, not necessarily with the stationing. So there are different solutions to that needs to be considered. Yeah.
Thank you. And then I think I have to address the question about Saudi Arabia and summits with Russia. I think it's maybe not a bad news, but still information about peace formula is not a comprehension on public level. So we have some piecemeal approaches to some points, to some stages, but if you try to put some puzzles in the same way, it just makes it more clear that it might be the same idea from the very beginning. So what is proposed by peace formula at the level of philosophy? So there is expert level. Under this expert level, there are international working groups along with all 10 points. These working groups are led by Ukrainian ministries or ministers or vice prime ministers with a special profile. For example, when it comes to food security, we have Vice Prime Minister Sviridenko, which is dealing with economic issues straight, so she knows about this food area. If it comes to point number 9 about justice, we have Justice Minister Mariuska, who's in charge of all this direction. So expert level, they propose different ideas about what mechanism, what initiatives should we put in these points to be not only related to Russia war against Ukraine, but globally. And they report them to the level of national security advisors. And we know of these names of Jeddah, of Malta, of Davos, where the meetings of NSA, national security advisors, and there are some reportings from working groups about the progress. This is the expert level, but to go ahead, we need political level. That's why we insist of launching this inaugural peace summit, because expert level will be expert level till the end of the day if it is not endorsed by senior level. So at this point, we gather those partners who respect our sovereignty and territorial integrity, and at the same time who agree on some points. But as we communicate already at the moment, and Mariia mentioned that we are also thinking about second summit. And second summit, we envisage there should be possibility for Russia, if it is ready, to go and embark on this activity. And I think what you mentioned about Saudi Arabia, this is part of this story. So it might be the second summit if we good on comprehensive peace plan with our partners, we could stage this summit in some of Global South partners, and Saudi Arabia volunteered to be one of these partners, which can just make this site for this global summit. So in this whole structure, it might be possible that Saudi Arabia will host next peace summit, which is under Ukraine's peace formula, and Russia, if Russia is ready, it might participate in this eventual summit. And I think for Saudi Arabia, it's also a part of not excuse, but another point, just to showcase the willingness to participate in this summit, but also to say that, okay, we need both sides if we want to agree. But about timing, it is still, I think, this fall it's very optimistic because, yeah. So in between, I think it may take more time, but I think what Saudi Arabia showcased and Bloomberg, which just took some part of the story, just showcased, it might be in that way. Igor, there was a question on your side or comments. Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Ambassador.
Sorry to come again, but I heard a few wordings about dialogue, about negotiations, about whatever. We have to be very careful about the words we use. Dialogue can happen between anybody, anytime. We speak. Negotiation is a completely different wording. Then we start speaking about concessions from one part to the other. Then we spoke about être intermédiaire, I don't know what is the English word, mediators, right? This is also some kind of dialogue and negotiation. No, these are negotiations, but between other partners. So not Ukraine, but let's say Vatican and Russia about Ukrainian children, right? So we have to be very careful about that. That's the first remark I would like to make. And secondly, speaking about the peace plan, the peace formula is based on the UN Charter. It might be accepted by the UN General Assembly, but it never will be accepted by the Security Council because there's a veto always available to either China or Russia or even the other countries, because they wouldn't want to be seen maybe in the future in the same position. So does it imply that in the end, we will go and we will force the UN to change and to have a new structure, a new system of functioning, because we see that today the UN doesn't answer, the challenge. Thank you.
It's a very important remark and question on your side. I think that in our way of tackling with this situation, we are quite clear. We are not ready for negotiation at that moment. But then we have to be clear with our partners that proposing some kind of platforms and ideas in some future point, there might be a situation when we sit at the table to negotiate the end of war. When it would be, it's still a big issue. But we have to just bear it in mind. And as it was also posed by our senior officials, there was recent article by head of our Defense and Security Council of Ukraine, Mr. Litvinenko, says, we understand that negotiations might be there, and we should be prepared for that. That's why this formula is envisaged. So to have plan A, what to do if Russia is ready, so to listen to conditions of 100 or 90 plus or something about that. So, but your point is fully taken about be careful with terminology. Is very important. About the points that we mentioned here, it maybe just goes to previous questions. I think we tried to find out of 10 those which are most agreeable between our partners. We're not talking about territorial integrity. We're not talking about reform of the UN Security Council. But basically, if you look into this point about respect to UN Charter and restoration of territorial integrity, we propose the reform of EU Security Council because it's needed there. But still, it is far from being a consensus on this level. So we try with those which might be a starter for our discussion, I would say in that way.
May I just would like to reflect. I'm really grateful to Jay explain the OM proceedings that everybody really knows about expert level, peace formula. But thank you that you really elaborated it pretty well. That actually the summit, it's the key aim to give already high level political high level to work on a peace framework. It's already meaning that experts worked. We already in different groups worked, representative from diplomats of Global South. You mentioned these meetings which we were held on different levels, and now it's a time for a high level political representatives to agree. And honestly, I can't, speculate about negotiations, but I just wanted to recall you about that we already have Normandy process, where it started long before 2022. We have with Russia waging war for long enough already to understand their readiness for real peace, restoration, and withdrawal of their troops. So we have already huge experience in negotiation with Russia. I will just stop here, so about mediation, but I hope you understand my hint. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I think that we are running out of time incrementally, so I think we could just have half a minute on each, just to wrap up on the ideas which you think is important to say just in the end of our event. Amanda, I'll start from you.
Actually, I'm not going to make a wrap-up comment. I just want to make a bit of a promotion for a forthcoming event that the EPC is going to organize on a really important topic, and a topic that was actually touched on a few times here. It's on President Zelensky's Bring Kids Back initiative. As was mentioned, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian children have been kidnapped or deported to Russia. Some of them have been managed to bring back, but unfortunately there's still many that remain in Russia. So on the 13th of June, we have a whole day conference related to this issue with a number of high-level representatives from the Office of the President of Ukraine, as well as from civil society. We're also going to be presenting a book related to this topic with, let's say, some very moving and sad stories from families who have actually been affected by this phenomena. It's really important this topic gets really headline visibility because it's important, and it's good to see that there are many countries engaged actually in the working group related to Bring Kids Back, including actually from the global south. So this is important. So I just wanted to flag this as my last comment.
Thank you so much, Mariia.
Just small remark, because I think I already said everything the most important about the peace summit. But I just wanted to highlight what I noticed. The often question to us, they putting if Ukraine is ready for peace, and I think we should also we are ready for peace or negotiations. But I think it's right the opposite. We should pose this question to Russia. You see, you shouldn't ask us. Of course, Ukraine, as nobody, as I started my intervention actually with this, Ukraine, as nobody else, would like to have a peace. But at what extent, you see? The question is really should be posed to Russia. Is Russia really ready to peace for negotiations? So it's also very important to pose, Russia should be really feel responsibility, and we should really remind Russia and show her place. They should bear responsibilities. We see that Russia really on the battlefield demonstrates no readiness for a peace currently. That's why my message will be final. Wrapping up already interventions, it's now key. You shouldn't relax, because with such messages, with such narrative, Putin just tries to again slow down supply of ammunition to Ukraine, showing he's maybe ready for negotiations. And leaders, some from global south, could say, you see, he's ready, so maybe Ukraine should sit to negotiate. But it's opposite. It means that we should be prepared even more now. And it's possible only with your assistance and support on the battleground. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Yulia.
Thank you. Just a few quick words. I think it's important that Ukraine stays in charge of its own peace process, as opposed to other contested, like the peace, the points proposed by China and Brazil. The war is on Ukraine's territory, right? So Ukraine has the right to determine how what it finds important. And the second thing, so Ukraine's peace formula, as I already said, in my opinion, had been very successful on the first stages. It stays the most comprehensive kind of format that propose a comprehensive solution, not for not only for Ukraine, but I think for a broader international kind of what is important for many countries. And so on the content, I think it has to stay the same, but depending on what is needed and how the international environment changes, there is also a degree of flexibility in its methods and instruments to achieve, so it can evolve further into, for example, a concrete plan how to implement some points.
Yeah, thank you. My last, or just wrapping up point here in the discussion would be, it's not usual for Ukrainian society to just cite our official level, but I will try to do that. We held jointly with MFA the first wartime diplomacy forum this April in Kiev. And while delivering an address, our Foreign Minister Kuleba said about peace format is one of 5 priorities for Ukraine for obvious reasons. But he said that, guys, we are on the verge of historical issues and transformations. And this just bears or puts responsibility on our shoulders as well, of every of us. So I think Ukraine is not enough to move this engine, to be the gears of this engine. So I think it is for all us, for your respective states, for your institutions to also to be involved in that. Because it's global issue, it's global scale, and every effort is counted for this. Thank you so much for being with us. I think we tried our best to explain what's going on with this formula. As I said, for Ukrainians, it is clear and logical. If not, we remain available for other clarification on our side. Thank you so much. Amanda, thank you for this amazing possibilities to address our friends. Thank you so much, and Slava Ukraini. Okay.